What if the most dangerous person you ever met had the kindest eyes you'd ever seen? He walks among us. He breathes the same air. He smiles the same smile. But behind that warmth is something the human mind was never meant to comprehend. Today, we descend into the psychological architecture of the most terrifying anime villain ever written, Johan Liebert. And by the end, you'll know exactly how to spot one in real life. Johan Liebert is the central antagonist of Naoki Urasawa's manga and anime series Monster, widely regarded as one of the most psychologically sophisticated stories ever told. He is not a monster in the supernatural sense. He is worse. He is entirely human, and he weaponizes that humanity with precision. Born as one of twin children subjected to horrific psychological experiments, Johan's mind was shattered and rebuilt into something terrifyingly functional. Where most people broke, Johan adapted. Where most people felt fear, Johan felt only strategy. He is the psychological blueprint, the template of what we now call a high-functioning psychopath with a grandiose delusional framework. The first weapon of a master manipulator is not power, not intelligence. It's the mask. Johan could walk into any room and within minutes, everyone would trust him. Not because he earned it, because he manufactured it. Psychologists call this mirroring. Adapting your behavior, vocabulary, and posture to match whoever you're speaking to creates instant, unconscious rapport. Johan does this instinctively, at a level so refined, his targets feel uniquely understood, like he sees into their soul, like he was made for them. In real life, this is one of the earliest warning signs. Someone who seems to instantly become exactly what you need them to be. Here's the paradox that breaks people's brains. Johan demonstrates extraordinary empathy. He understands pain, perhaps better than anyone. He sits with the grieving. He validates the broken. He sees the invisible. And in those moments, he is telling the truth. He does see them. The difference between empathy as connection and empathy as a weapon is the intent. Johan uses your pain as data, as leverage, as a map to your core. Once a manipulator knows your core wound, the thing you've never said out loud, they own the roadmap to your behavior. In real life, be cautious of anyone who seems to know your pain faster than your long-term friends. That speed isn't magic, it's method. Most people try to impress. They talk about themselves. They perform. Johan does the opposite. He asks, he listens, he remembers everything, and he asks follow-up questions that make you feel, for perhaps the first time in your life, truly heard. Neurologically, being deeply listened to activates the same reward pathways as physical touch. It creates bonding, fast and profound. Every question Johan asks is an information-gathering operation. By the end of an hour with him, he knows more about you than your therapist. What are they? Who failed you first? What do you need most right now? What's the thing you've never told anyone? What would make you feel safe? And what would you give up to get it? Stop. Before we go further, I need you to consider something that will change how you see every relationship you've ever had. What if someone's been using Johan's blueprint on you, right now? Not in anime, in your life, in your workplace, in your family. The traits we're about to study aren't just fictional. They're documented, they're clinical, and after this video, you will recognize them immediately. Drop a comment right now. Have you ever met someone who made you feel uniquely seen, and later realized it wasn't real? Let's keep going. We're only at trait 3, there are 12, and they build on each other like a trap being assembled around you in slow motion. Johan's philosophy is genuinely nihilistic. He believes human existence has no inherent meaning, and he's not wrong about the philosophy. The danger is what he does with it. Nihilism is a legitimate philosophical position, but a manipulator weaponizes it differently. They use it to destabilize your sense of purpose, to make you dependent on them for meaning. Johan doesn't just believe nothing matters. He acts as if he's exempt from consequences. And this exemption becomes hypnotic to those who are drowning in guilt. To someone who has always felt caged by guilt, responsibility, or pain, encountering someone who seems utterly free of it is intoxicating. Clinically, this is called grandiose narcissism combined with moral disengagement. The real-world warning sign. They never feel guilt, and they make you feel foolish for feeling yours. Johan had a singular superpower. People confessed things to him they'd never said aloud. Murders, shame, sins, secrets buried for decades. There's a psychological principle called reciprocal disclosure. When someone shares something vulnerable first, you feel compelled to match or exceed their vulnerability. Johan would open with a carefully calibrated vulnerability, just enough to seem real, never enough to be leveraged. Then he'd wait, and then they'd tell him everything. And everything they told him became a pressure point. Filed, indexed, reserved for future use. Warning sign in real life. Someone who extracts your deepest secrets early, before trust has been genuinely earned, is not connecting with you. They're arming themselves. Isolation is not dramatic in skilled hands. It doesn't look like a cage. It looks like deepening intimacy. Johan made people feel that their pre-existing relationships were shallow, couldn't possibly understand them the way he did. He made their old life feel insufficient. Isolation serves a function, a socially connected person is harder to control. Their friends will sound the alarm. Their family will intervene. Connection is armor. A real partner, a real friend, a healthy authority figure wants you more connected to a full life. They add to your world. They do not become your entire world. Red flag, non-negotiable. If someone consistently reframes your existing relationships as threats, leave. That is textbook coercive control. There is a specific moment in Monster that defines Johan's God complex, when he says he wants to be the last human standing at the end of everything. The God complex is not simply ego. It is the belief, often unconscious, that normal rules of morality, consequence, and human connection do not apply to you. Clinically, grandiose narcissism differs from ordinary confidence in one key way. Ordinary confidence makes room for others to also be great. Grandiosity cannot. In real life, the God complex often hides inside extreme competence. They are talented, genuinely, but talent becomes the justification for their exemption from accountability. Warning sign. They cannot tolerate being wrong. Not won't, cannot. Because being wrong shatters the architecture of their entire self-concept. Let me break the fourth wall here for a moment. We're not studying Johan Liebert for anime trivia. The DSM-5 estimates 1 in 25 people shows significant psychopathic traits. That's 4%. In your school, your office, your family, your church, your gym. This is not a rare creature. The people who most successfully implement Johan's blueprint in real life don't look like villains. They look like the most charismatic person in the room. If this video is hitting differently than you expected, that's the point. Hit like if you've recognized someone in what we've described so far. We are exactly halfway through. Traits 8 through 12 are where Johan's methodology becomes truly terrifying, because they're almost impossible to detect in the moment. Johan was a master of what I call manufactured serendipity, making events appear to happen organically that he had orchestrated in advance. When you're playing checkers and someone is playing chess, their advantages look like luck to you. That's precisely the point. Johan would create the conditions for an event, then be conveniently present when it occurred, so the target would feel they'd arrived at the same place naturally. This is why it's so hard to identify in real time. The feeling is genuine. You really did randomly run into them. You really did stumble onto this thing together. The randomness was design. Research on dark triad personalities documents this extensively, the proactive engineering of situations that create emotional dependency. It has a clinical name, covert instrumental manipulation. Perhaps the most psychologically definitive trait of someone like Johan. Other people are not fully real to them. They are functions, instruments, variables in an equation. To be seen by Johan was to be both fully understood and completely dehumanized simultaneously. He knew you, he simply did not extend you the status of person. Neuroscience has documented that psychopathic brains process human suffering in fundamentally different regions, problem-solving areas, not empathic response areas. Survivors describe a specific moment of realization, not that they were lied to, but that they were never actually seen as a person. That's the deepest wound. The warning sign is subtle. Watch how someone talks about people who are no longer useful to them. Do those people still deserve humanity in their language? Johan almost never lied outright. This is the genius and the terror of his method. He deployed truth as a weapon.
When every statement is technically true, but carefully selected and sequenced to build a false understanding, that is far more dangerous than lying. Selective truth, revealing only what serves your narrative while concealing context, is one of the most legally defensible and psychologically devastating forms of manipulation. In Monster, Johan's most chilling moments aren't when he lies. It's when he's completely truthful about terrible things, with calm precision. The defense: don't only evaluate what someone tells you, ask yourself what context is conspicuously absent. What question are they not answering? Most manipulation is impatient. Johan's was glacial. He could invest years into a single outcome, his patience being itself a form of predatory superiority. When someone plays a long game, they have placed their outcome so far into your future that by the time you arrive there, you've forgotten they pointed you in that direction. Johan built relationships the way a spider builds a web, each strand individually harmless, the pattern only apparent from above, the trap complete before the prey is aware. Real-world application: when someone has been extraordinarily consistent over a long period in attention, in availability, in their version of you, that consistency may not be organic. It may be maintained. Warning: be suspicious of anyone whose patience with you seems infinite. Real people get frustrated. Real people have needs. Infinite patience often means infinite investment in outcome. Every great manipulator has an exit strategy. They know when the relationship has served its function, and they leave in ways that make you feel you caused it. When Johan was done with someone, they rarely knew why. The ending felt like their fault. This was by design. Gaslighting the exit, convincing the abandoned party that their pain is an overreaction, that the connection wasn't what they thought, is the final move. For survivors, the confusion you feel after is not weakness. It is the designed consequence of what was done. Your brain was deliberately disoriented. The antidote to isolation is connection. To manufactured empathy is authentic community. To the long game, your own long game of healing. To understand why Johan is so psychologically accurate, we need to understand the genius who created him. To understand why Johan is so psychologically accurate, we need to understand the genius who created him. When you map Johan's behavior against clinical diagnostic criteria for antisocial personality disorder and psychopathy, the alignment is not coincidental. It's research-based. Monster's setting, post-Cold War Europe, the legacy of authoritarian psychological experimentation, is not accidental backdrop. It's the soil from which Johan grew. What Urasawa understood and what makes Monster endure is that evil doesn't emerge from nowhere. It emerges from the intersection of nature and nurture, of wound and opportunity. To understand the monster, you must understand the child. Johan and Anna, twin children, were subjected to a series of psychological experiments that shattered the normal development of self. Psychological research on early childhood trauma, particularly identity disruption and institutionalized abuse, documents exactly the developmental pathway we see in Johan. The nameless monster, a child who gave away their name, their identity, their self, is not metaphor. It is clinical documentation of what extreme identity disruption produces. This does not excuse, it explains. Understanding how monsters are made is how we prevent making more of them, and how we protect children from the conditions that create them. This is why child protection is not soft science. It is prevention against the creation of individuals who, as adults, will do harm at scale. The genius of Monster is that its hero is not a warrior. He is a doctor, someone who heals, forced to reckon with whether healing one child unleashed catastrophe on thousands. Tenma's dilemma is the real philosophical question of Monster. If you could prevent evil by ending one life, but that life belongs to a child, what does your answer say about you? What Tenma represents psychologically is the antithesis of Johan, a person who refuses to dehumanize even his enemy, who maintains his capacity for conscience under pressure. Their final confrontation is not about power. It is about whether humanity, flawed, burdened, morally complex humanity, can withstand the clarity of nihilism. Tenma teaches us the real lesson. Conscience is a choice made again and again under pressure. Not once, every day, every encounter. What makes Monster's psychological portrait of manipulation so complete is not just Johan. It's everyone around him. Each supporting character is a different case study in manipulation's effects. Anna, Johan's twin, same origin, same wound, represents the path not taken. The proof that even profound childhood trauma does not inevitably produce a monster. Inspector Lunge represents what happens when logic alone confronts something that operates beyond logic's jurisdiction. His ultimate failure illuminates Johan's superiority at human systems. Bonaparte is the real horror beneath Johan, the institutional evil, the system that decided children were raw material for experiment. Johan is the result. Bonaparte is the cause. The full web of Monster's cast is a masterclass in how one psychopathic individual ripples through dozens of lives. Some destroyed, some transformed, some accidentally elevated. Let us be clinically precise. If Johan Liebert were a real patient, what would the formal psychological assessment show? Antisocial personality disorder, criterion A, failure to conform to social norms, deceitfulness, impulsivity, irritability and aggressiveness, disregard for safety of others, irresponsibility, lack of remorse. Johan meets all 7. On the Hare psychopathy checklist, the gold standard clinical instrument, Johan's theoretical score would approach the maximum, placing him in the extreme range of psychopathy. Neurologically, psychopathy is associated with reduced amygdala response to emotional stimuli, reduced anterior cingulate activation, and altered orbitofrontal cortex functioning. It is neurobiological, not simply a choice. Johan represents a rare convergence. Psychopathy, grandiose narcissism, and what some clinicians call a nihilistic delusional framework, each amplifying the others into something qualitatively different. Okay, I'm going to give you a rapid-fire scenario, and I want you to identify the manipulation tactic being used. Ready? Scenario 1. Someone you met 30 minutes ago tells you their deepest childhood trauma. They say they've never told anyone before. What's the tactic? Reciprocal disclosure trap. They're creating artificial intimacy, bypassing your normal trust timeline to accelerate your emotional dependency. Scenario 2. A new person in your life offhandedly mentions your best friend seemed distant with them. Just an observation, no accusation. What's happening? Isolation manufacturing, phase 1. They're beginning to loosen the bonds between you and people who know you well, people who would warn you. Johan Liebert is fictional. The psychological profile he embodies is not. History and forensic psychology are full of individuals who deployed these exact tactics. Research from Babiek, Hare, and others documents the prevalence of psychopathic traits in corporate leadership and the specific tactics used to ascend and maintain power. Forensic psychologists who work with survivors of high-control relationships describe a consistent phenomenon: intelligent, perceptive people who say they had no idea until they did. Here is the empowering truth. Knowledge of these tactics is the single most effective defense against them. Studies on manipulation resilience consistently show education as the primary protective factor. That That person watching right now who keeps pausing and thinking, yes, you are becoming harder to manipulate in real time. This video is working. Monster does something few works dare. It takes Johan's worldview seriously, not endorses seriously. It asks, what if he's not completely wrong? Nihilism as philosophy can be deeply honest. The universe may genuinely be indifferent. Suffering may genuinely lack inherent meaning. Johan's error is not his diagnosis, it's his prescription. Camus argued, if life has no inherent meaning, we create meaning, and that creative act is itself the rebellion against meaninglessness. Johan chose destruction. Camus suggests creation. The counter to Johan's worldview is not proof that life has meaning. It's the observation that living as if it does, building, connecting, protecting, produces less suffering than the alternative. We cannot argue with Johan. We can only outlive him by building things that matter, connecting with people we choose, and refusing to let his clarity become our conclusion. For those who haven't read Monster, no explicit spoilers. For those who have, Urasawa chose ambiguity, not because he couldn't decide, because the ambiguity is the point. The open ending of Monster reflects a profound psychological truth. People like Johan do not resolve cleanly. Their effects don't end. The question they ask doesn't answer itself. What Tenma ultimately demonstrates is that doing the right thing, as best as you can determine it, is worth the cost, even if the outcome is uncertain, even if it scars you. Monster is 18 volumes of Naoki Urasawa asking, what is a monster? And answering, look closely. The monster is always made. The question is always about the making. If you haven't read Monster, you now have everything you need to begin it differently than most people do. You will see what others miss. Everything we've learned today is not just intellectual, it's practical armor. Here is the defense framework against Johan's blueprint. Defense 1 time. Genuine connection deepens over time naturally. Manufactured connection must accelerate. It has an agenda. Slow everything down. Real relationships survive slowness. Defense 2. Maintain your existing relationships even when a new relationship feels like everything. Genuine partners add to your world. Manipulators need your world to shrink. Defense 3. Information reciprocity. After a significant conversation, how much do you know about them? If the ratio is dramatically lopsided, ask yourself why they deflect. Defense 4. Disagree with them, deliberately, about something small. Watch what happens. Genuine connection survives disagreement. Manufactured connection cannot afford it. Defense 5. Your nervous system is smarter than you think. If something feels wrong when nothing appears wrong, that is data. Trust it. Wait, before we get to the conclusion, I need to say something that might be uncomfortable. What if some of these traits describe you? Here's the nuance. Psychopathic traits exist on a spectrum. Charm is not pathological. Strategic thinking is not pathological. Emotional compartmentalization is not pathological. The difference between healthy and pathological is not the presence of traits, it's the pattern, the intent, the remorse, the capacity for genuine connection. Self-awareness is the opposite of psychopathy. A psychopath cannot genuinely question their own behavior. The fact that you're asking yourself these questions is the evidence you're okay.
The last section is the one that will actually change something for you. Don't stop here. There is a question that forensic psychologists and criminologists are regularly asked. Does studying evil make you evil? The research is unambiguous. Studying dark psychology, understanding manipulation, learning the architecture of harm, does not produce those traits. It produces their opposite.
You study the pathogen to develop the antibody. You understand the predator to protect the prey. That is not darkness. That is medicine.
The people who understand manipulation best are almost always either clinicians who've studied it, researchers who've documented it, or survivors who've lived it and transformed it.
You, right now, having watched this video, are harder to manipulate than you were 45 minutes ago. That is not a small thing. Pass it on.
Let's lock these in. 12 traits. Rapid fire. 1. The perfect mask. 2. Weaponized empathy. 3. Strategic questioning. These are the entry tools, how they get close. 4. Nihilism as destabilization. 5. The confession trap. 6. Manufacturing isolation. These are the control tools, how they consolidate. 7. The God complex. 8. Manufactured serendipity. 9. Dehumanization. These are the maintenance tools, how they sustain control. 10. Truth as selective deception. 11. The long game. 12. The designed exit. The complete blueprint. Now you see it. It cannot be unseen. Monster is the zenith, but it's not alone. Several other works understand the psychology of manipulation with similar fidelity. We need to talk about Kevin asks the same question as Monster from a mother's perspective. How does this happen? Both are unflinching. Both are essential. The real FBI behavioral science work,
documented in Mindhunter, shows us that understanding the archetype protects victims. It's not academic, it's operational. Robert Hare's Without Conscience remains the definitive clinical foundation. Every trait we've discussed today has scientific backing in this work and its successors. The full reading list is in the description. Your education doesn't end here, it begins. There is a dismissiveness in mainstream culture toward anime as a medium for serious ideas. Monster disproves it, not argues against it, disproves it. The psychological depth of Monster exceeds most Western literary fiction that addresses similar themes. The medium of anime allowed Urasawa to do things novels cannot. Anime allows for the visualization of internal psychological states, the color palette of anxiety, the visual distortion of dissociation, the precise timing of manipulations reveal. Monster is taught in university psychology and ethics courses. Its influence on how we discuss psychopathy in popular culture is documented and significant. When we study Monster through this lens, we don't diminish it. We honor it by taking seriously what it takes seriously about the human capacity for both evil and conscience. I want to take a moment to address something directly: the ethics of creating content about manipulation tactics. There is a genuine debate in forensic psychology about whether publicizing manipulation tactics risks giving a playbook to those who would use them. The research consensus: the people most likely to misuse this information already have it. The people most protected by it are those who didn't know. Clinical practitioners who work with survivors of manipulation and coercive control consistently and overwhelmingly advocate for wider education of these patterns. This video was made for you, the person who needed to understand, not for anyone who would use it as a manual. The difference is in what you do next. The most important voices in any conversation about manipulation are not the analysts. They are the people who lived it, couldn't see it from inside. It's not about intelligence. It's about being human and being targeted by someone who understood human needs better than they felt them. Recovery from this specific kind of harm, having your reality deliberately confused, takes longer than most people understand, and it requires being believed. If any of this video has landed as recognition rather than education, resources are in the description. You are not alone, and what happened to you was not your fault. The goal of this content always is to add one more person to the community of those who know. The more who know, the safer we all are. Monster was serialized in Big Comic Original from 1994 to 2001. It has never gone out of print. It is continuously rediscovered by each generation. Monster resonates globally because manipulation is not culturally specific. The psychological architecture of harm crosses every border. The Madhouse anime adaptation, 74 episodes, is widely considered among the finest anime productions ever made. Its faithfulness to the source is itself remarkable. 20 years after completion, Monster continues to generate daily analysis, debate, and discovery. That is the mark of a living work. If you're starting Monster after this video, you begin it with one of the deepest analyses of its central character available. Read it that way. Johan will be even more terrifying. We are at the final section. What I'm about to tell you is the most important thing we'll cover, and I need your full attention. Here is what this video has actually given you. Not tricks, not hacks. The genuine shift in perception that comes from understanding a pattern. Close your eyes for a second, actually do it, and visualize the next new person you meet. What do you notice now that you wouldn't have noticed this morning? You've built a pattern recognition system today. Not paranoia, discernment. The difference is crucial. Discernment protects. Paranoia isolates. What you do with this knowledge is the only question that matters now. Let's answer it. Applying this knowledge doesn't mean treating everyone as a suspect. It means bringing the quality of attention to relationships that protects you while allowing genuine connection. In your workplace, notice who claims credit during success and assigns blame during failure. Notice who listens as much as they speak. Notice the timeline of trust being requested. Knowing what manipulation looks like also clarifies what it doesn't look like. Your genuine friendships, where you both know each other, both have power, both can leave, are now more clearly visible. Consider this practice. Once a week, review a significant relationship and ask, is there reciprocity? Is there information exchange? Is my world expanding or contracting with this person? The most powerful thing you can do with this knowledge. Share it. With a friend who needed to hear it. With a family member who might be in it right now. The characters in Monster who resist Johan's influence share consistent characteristics. Not strength in the conventional sense, but psychological rootedness. Johan struggles with those who have a well-developed sense of self that isn't contingent on external validation. He has nothing to offer them that they need. Authentic community provides narrative protection. If multiple people who genuinely know you would notice a discrepancy, that discrepancy becomes harder to sustain. Secure attachment developed through genuine relational history and often therapy, is perhaps the single greatest protection against predatory manipulation. Resistance is built, not possessed. It requires therapy, genuine relationships, practiced self-knowledge, and the accumulated experience of knowing your own mind. Monster changed what dark psychological manga could be. Its influence on subsequent works, both in anime and in literary fiction, is documented and substantial. Creators who cite Monster's influence include some of the most significant names in contemporary psychological manga and anime. The lineage is direct and proud. Clinical psychology programs use Monster as a discussion tool for psychopathy, empathy, and moral reasoning. The work earned entry into the Academy on its own terms. In 2025, Monster continues to be discovered. Each new reader arrives to find a work that waited for them. Unchanged, still working, still terrifying, still necessary. Johan Liebert endures because he asks the question we most need answered. How does someone become this? And how do we make sure we don't become the conditions that create them? You came to this video knowing Johan Liebert was a great anime villain. You're leaving knowing he is also a clinical portrait, a warning system, and a mirror. The 12 traits: mask of normalcy, weaponized empathy, strategic questioning, nihilism as tool, the confession trap, manufacturing isolation, God complex, manufactured serendipity, dehumanization, selective truth, the long game, the designed exit. We used Monster to understand psychology. We used psychology to understand Monster. And in that double mirror, we found something useful for living a more protected, more aware, more connected life. Tenma is your model, not because he was unaffected, because he chose conscience every day under pressure without certainty of outcome. That is the only answer to Johan. What will you do differently tomorrow? That's the only homework. Answer it honestly, and the video has done its work. You're now part of a community of people who understand what most people don't. That community is the point. Let's build it. Hit like if this changed how you see manipulation. Subscribe for the next deep psychological analysis. But most importantly, share this with one person who needs it. Want to know which of the 12 traits surprised you most? And have you witnessed any of these patterns in real life? The comment section is a genuine conversation. I read it. Next video, Light Yagami from Death Note. A completely different psychological profile, equally dangerous, even more seductive. You won't see it the same way twice. This is the Psychological Blueprint series, the deepest analysis of anime psychology anywhere on YouTube. Subscribe. The next one is already in production.